In this Top Grades Made Easy video, I'm going to give you 10 words and phrases and show you how using those in your writing will get you top grades with A Christmas Carol. At number 1, we have the word redemption. We're going to start straight in with Dickens' purpose, which is to show that society needs to change like Scrooge needs to change. Scrooge is an evil persona at the beginning, but he undergoes this state of redemption. He changes in order to become good, and the moral message is that we, the reader, should do the same. It's going to be loads easier for us because we're not an evil miser like Scrooge. This will also link to the Christian message of the novel coming up later. At number 2, we have the role of the employer. Most teachers don't really teach this as a thing, but it is massive for Dickens. He's obsessed with the amount that Bob gets paid. He even names him after a shilling. That's what the word Bob meant in Dickens' time. Bob gets paid 3 bob, 3 shillings. Dickens' point is, Scrooge doesn't pay him that because he's a miser. He pays him that because it's the going rate. So portraying Scrooge as a miser, paying the going rate, says to the reader, look, our society, which includes you, dear reader, is the equivalent of this immoral miser. We need to pay more as employers. And when you get to the end of the novel, that's exactly why Scrooge increases Bob's wages to carry that moral point. That's how we have to change. At number 3, we have paternalism and father. Paternalism means that you have to take on the role of father to society. Who's Dickens writing for? People who can afford his novel. It's published at an expensive price, a shilling, a third of a week's wages for somebody like Bob. And his idea is, if I write this book for people who have disposable income, I can encourage them to look after those in society that they are responsible for. In Dickens' time, there was no superstore, there was no Tesco's, there was no Amazon. If you wanted anything done, you paid someone. And so every household owner was actually an employer. They would have domestic staff, maids, cooks. They would employ people to go out and get their food from the grocers, from the butchers. They didn't go out and get this stuff themselves. And so they were at the centre of a little economy. Now, Dickens says, look, you have a paternal role, a paternalistic role. Your job is to be like a father to these people. And that's why he includes these details of the charwoman and the washerwoman and the undertaker's man who have to steal from Scrooge's dead body. Why? They've got jobs. Well, it's because society doesn't pay the people it employs enough to live on. The theme of fatherhood is therefore central to the novel. You'll notice that Scrooge has been abandoned by his own father, and at the end, what makes him change, that redemption, is deciding to become a second father to Tiny Tim. Paternalism runs through the novel. At number 4, Malthusian, named after the Reverend Malthus, who developed this economic theory that said, look, there are only so many resources that we've got, but if we start having more and more poor people, they will eat up those resources so that there won't be enough to go round for everyone, which will create a downward spiral of more poor people. And politically, this led to the poor laws, the creation of the workhouses, and this kind of demonisation of the poor, treating them as deserving poor. So the idea was you're only poor because you were lazy, and Dickens argues completely against that. He says, no, you're poor because of social circumstances, and we need to help the poor by giving them an education and by having this paternalistic attitude towards them through charity and education. Which leads us on to charity. That's why Scrooge refuses to give to charity at the beginning of the novel, but he links it to the poor laws, the jails, the workhouses, because he's saying, I would prefer that because that's the Malthusian view. And then when we get to the end of the novel, he gives so much to charity that he doesn't even mention it out loud. He whispers it because it's such an embarrassingly large gift. This is Dickens' way of saying, look, be paternalistic, look after everybody else, those in society less well off than you. Charity. Number 6, memento mori. This is a Latin phrase which can be translated like this: remember, you must die. And this was a really popular idea in Victorian times, not just because mortality was high, but it was also a reminder that you needed to lead a good life, a Christian life, because at any moment you could die, and who was going to judge you? The eye in the sky. God was going to be there, and he was going to decide on the fate of your soul. Now, we don't get that much discussion of the soul, but the introduction of Marley, the ghost who's doomed to wander the earth until he can make things better, is an idea that comes from the Catholic Church, from purgatory. And so this idea that you need to be redeemed, because remember, you might die at any moment, is a Christian idea. And it's a Victorian idea, this fascination with death, reminder that you're going to die. Now, if we get to the final phantom, the ghost of Christmas yet to come, you can see that Scrooge dresses him as the Grim Reaper. He hasn't got the scythe, but he's got the hood and the darkness, and he keeps showing death to Scrooge. Scrooge eventually works out, oh my God, this corpse is me. He sees his grave. This whole idea is the Victorian fascination, not just with death, but the implications for how we should then behave as good moral people. Number 7, if you're this far into the video, you're ready for an idea your teachers won't have taught you. It comes from modern psychology and it's called patterns of attachment. In real life, it means this: we have relationships with the people who look after us and love us in the first 3 years of our lives, and we repeat those relationships as we grow older. Now, the problem is none of us remember our lives before the age of 3. And so these attachments are kind of hidden in our subconscious. We repeat them without knowing why. And this is exactly what happens to Scrooge. We can see that he's abandoned as a child. His mother is presumably dead. His father sends him off to school, doesn't even bring him back at Christmas. And we understand that this is a child who's been completely abandoned. Now, that pattern of attachment is a detachment from his caregiver, from his parents, and Scrooge repeats that. So he ruins his relationship with Belle, just like he didn't have a mother when he was younger. He refuses to take care of anyone else in society, just like his father refused to take care of him. And so he mirrors the patterns of attachment he had as a kid. The whole point of the novel, the redemption, is when Scrooge realises he can get rid of that, and he becomes, paternalistically, a second father to Tiny Tim. And so he rejects the role that his own father played, and he becomes a completely different kind of father to those who need him in society. Patterns of attachment, Scrooge learns to break them. Number 8. It's really a funny, humorous novel, and it's worth pointing that out. It begins with the voice of this ghost who is just having fun as the narrator. He loves these over-top descriptions of Scrooge as this covetous old sinner, the solitary as an oyster. All of this is hyperbole, over-exaggeration, but it comes from the idea of comedy. When Marley arrives, yes, there's a bit of fear about it, but Scrooge says, there's more of gravy than the grave about you, implying he's just got indigestion. The whole book is full of jokes, and when we get to the end of it, it's full of laughter. It's the sense of humour that Scrooge develops that saves him. And Dickens focuses on the fact that he kept laughing, even though he knew by becoming this wonderful employer, this wonderful charity giver, that the rest of society was laughing at Scrooge, mocking him, but he doesn't care. He still knows that his redemption is worth it. He's broken the patterns of attachment and he has become a complete human being. This brings us to number 9, Dickens' didactic message. Didactic means that you're trying to teach a lesson, usually a moral one. And so this whole novel has a didactic lesson at the end, that A, we should give to charity. B, we should love our fellow man. 3, we should be paternalistic towards those who depend on us. And 4, we ought to pay everybody a fair wage. And then number 10, this is a Christian story, and so that dovetails, it fits, it meshes with a Christian message. The Christian message links to charity, but it also links to this idea of sacrifice. You need to give in order for other people to improve. The reason that all 10 of those are going to get you top marks is because you will use them to explain Dickens' purpose. If you do that, it is impossible to get less than a grade 7. In the next video, you're probably interested in seeing how a student gets grade 9 in an essay on A Christmas Carol.